With social justice advocates supposedly concerned with the fate of the poor, it may seem strange that they seem to have paid remarkably little attention to places where the poor have risen out of poverty at a dramatic rate and on a massive scale. That at least raises the question whether the social justice advocates' priorities are the poor themselves, or the social justice advocates' own vision of the world and their own role in that vision. Hi, I'm Michael Hernandez, and welcome to Rumble Book Club. Today we're going to take a look at a solid book that just released this year, and I'm glad I finished reading it because now I get to share it with you. Today we're going to take a look at Social Justice Fallacies by the one and only Dr. Thomas Sowell. In this book, Dr. Thomas Sowell takes aim at a handful of different beliefs, predominantly held by those on the political left, and in each chapter he dedicates that chapter to a particular idea held by the social justice left. And he presents the idea, how it's been pursued in politics and in society, using history and data. What were the results of that idea being pursued? And given those results, was the idea true or was it false? First, Sowell takes aim at the equal chances fallacy, the belief that you're going to see proportional representation of all groups in all different professions. So to use a rough example, women make up 50% of the population, so they should make up 50% of the population of CEOs, business owners, and lawyers. Sowell makes quick work of this idea, saying not only do we have different histories, which takes us to different bloodlines and with different countries, and those different countries have different cultures, customs, waterways, geography, animals, wildlife, all these different things that give them different specialties. But even if you go down to the very elemental level, you're not even going to see similar outcomes among children in the same family. So you can take a family of 5 children, they're going to have different IQs, different preferences, different likes, different dislikes, different strengths, different weaknesses, because they have different DNA. People are people, and people are very different. Next, Sowell writes on racial fallacies, and one that really stands out is the Civil Rights Act of the 1960s and its effectiveness. We've all been taught, including me in school, that the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s was the key to black potential in America. And what Sowell does is he points out a couple different pieces of data that kind of counteract that common understanding. When you look at the poverty rate in black America from the 1960s to the 1990s, just as a 30-year spread, you can see that the poverty rate dropped. If you just look at that timeline, it makes it look like the Civil Rights Act, that was the key. But Sowell takes that timeline and pushes it back. He looks at not just the 1960s, but the 1950s, 1940s, 1930s. And what he shows is the poverty rate in black America, even in the pre-civil rights era, was plummeting. It was falling like a rock. And then when the Civil Rights Act was passed in the 1960s, it actually began to slow down. The poverty rate actually began to slow in its decline in black America. On the reverse trend, Sowell writes on the single motherhood rate in black America from the 1940s all the way to today. So if you look at the single motherhood rate among blacks and whites in America, in the pre-civil rights era, they were relatively comparable. They were incredibly low. Now, across all of society, the single motherhood rate has skyrocketed, particularly since the 1960s. But if you look at black America, it went from a single motherhood rate below 20% to a single motherhood rate almost at 80% today. In the next chapter, Sowell discusses the chess pieces fallacy, which is the belief held mostly among the political elite that people will not respond to the decisions you make about them. They're like inert pieces of wood or chess pieces on a board. One particular example he uses is the tax rate among the top 1% income bracket, or that top 10% income bracket. So there's this commonly held belief, mostly on the political left and not exclusively, that if you just hike the tax rates higher and higher for that top 10% or even that top 1%, if you start targeting those billionaires and bleeding them through high tax rates, that they won't respond to that at all. They won't make decisions to protect them and their money and their financial interests. They'll just let it happen to them. But he uses historical context, not just in American history or in Western history, but across all these different cultures, that rich people will respond if you try to take more of their money from them. So he shows very simple data, which has been proven every single year, pretty much since the time we've actually been taking statistics of this information. And that's whenever you raise the tax rate you actually lower the amount of income you're actually able to get from those people, because though, especially that top tier, they know how to manage their money. They know where to put it. So they're just going to put it in, tax exempt securities, offshore accounts. They'll move out of that city, out of that state, out of that nation in order to protect their financial interests. But in historical examples, when you lower the tax rate, you actually increase the amount of what the effective tax rate is, how much money you're actually able to get from them. In the next chapter, Sowell writes about the importance of consequential knowledge. So there's two different beliefs here. There's the belief that consequential knowledge is dispersed among a few elite, and those few elite have the responsibility with this high esteemed knowledge to make decisions for everybody else. The other belief is that consequential knowledge is actually dispersed evenly throughout all of society. Aggregate knowledge is heavier and more consequential and does more for society than elite knowledge in the hands of a few. In the last chapter, Sowell discusses words, deeds, and dangers. That's the name of the chapter. And the whole chapter reminds me of the book written by Michael Knowles called Speechless: Controlling Words, Controlling Minds, in which he shows how the left attempts to coat over reality or hide reality by changing the meaning of words, changing the context of words, by eliminating certain words, or substituting them. The central point that Sowell makes in this last chapter is no matter how much you try and hide it, reality always ends up reasserting itself. I found this book on Amazon. You can find it there too. It's a fantastic read, and it's only about 130 pages, so he gives you an insane amount of information in a very small package, and he has a lot of notes. You can tell where he's sourcing all of his information, so it's reliable, it's quick-witted, and he's able to take a lot of information and distill it to where even a dummy like me can read it. So the book is Social Justice Fallacies by Thomas Sowell. Go out and get yourself a copy. Thanks for watching, everybody, and go read something.